This is our inaugural 2021 Tallahassee Film Festival, virtual cinema event with Mary Wharton, the director of Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President, and also a Tallahassee native. Quite a few family members here with you tonight, including the Sauce Boss, live from his new studio. Bill will favor us with some of the soundtrack material during our conversation, or we'll take a little break for some music in a little bit. And basically what we'll do is I'm going to chat with Mary a little bit, and then we'll probably take a little musical break and then come back and kind of open it up for questions. And it seems like there's not too many people here, so we can probably just, if you will just, there's this function here where you can do an applause. So if you will, when you want to ask a question, just do that, and I'll find you and unmute you so you can speak. But we have to keep the mute button on to keep all the extraneous household ambient noise out of the, out of the pipeline. So anyway, we'll get going here. So the film is now available everywhere, right? It's just hit the streaming platforms.
The whole wide world. It just premiered in the UK this last weekend, and it's going to Japan and New Zealand, and it's making its way around the globe. But it's available in the United States on Amazon and Google Play and Fandango. iTunes. Where cable on demand, wherever you get your on-demand video.
That's great. It obviously the timing worked out very fortuitously. I don't know if that was your doing or just the luck of the draw to have it come out in the middle of this election season, and then now, of course, it's arriving at its widest distribution point just as we've had a changing of the guard.
It's interesting. There were times when we were, we really tried to rush to make this film as quickly as we could because of President Carter's advanced age. We were terrified that he might die while we were in the middle of making the film, and we knew that like every news network already has a Jimmy Carter documentary in the can, just waiting to put the time and cause of death at the end, and so we were kind of racing against the clock, and we also thought, like, it's so timely, this needs to come out now, and it took us longer than we had hoped, but the current political climate as we went along just was kind of like the gift that kept giving. It just kept becoming more and more relevant and more needed and necessary, I think. And that's been the greatest or the most gratifying part of having it come out, where I actually was I wanted it to come out before the election, and it was available in a limited form before the election, and so some people did get to see it, but it didn't go really wide like on CNN. I was surprised that CNN didn't want to air it before the election, but so many people that saw it in just this month have just been like, this is everything that we needed to see right now, and that's been really gratifying, the response.
Yeah, that's great. For those who don't know you, which is some of these people, not everyone's from Tallahassee, but I was going to ask you just about your own background and how you got into filmmaking, and of course your background here in Florida, just that whole personal journey to filmmaking, and also just about growing up here and any particular things that led you on your way to where you are now.
Well, I mean, as a kid, I grew up in Tallahassee, and you know, we didn't have a TV for a lot of my childhood. Sometimes we did, but not always. But I was obsessed with movies. We would go to the movies a lot.
Mhm.
And I would go see the same movie over and over again. This was before VCRs, you know, before, you know, so you would just like see movies when they were on TV, or you would go to the movies. And I was obsessed. But, you know, at the time when I was a kid, there weren't a lot of female directors that I had ever heard of. There were some, for sure, but there weren't a lot. And I never really thought of being a director as like a job that I could have. It never occurred to me that
Right.
was really an option for me. I just, you know, like the directors that I knew their names, you know, I didn't know, and I still couldn't tell you the name of like the director of The Wizard of Oz or Grease, which was one of my favorite movies as a kid. Like, I don't know the name of the director, I'm sad to say. But, you know, the directors that I knew were like Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola and those kind of 70s bad boys of Hollywood. And, you know, that was the model, but it was like, well, that's not me. I can't be that, you know? But I did learn how to use a camera when I was in high school at Sale High School in Tallahassee. I had an amazing teacher, Cecilia Maloney, who taught me how to use, you know, Pentax, and I started learning black and white photography, and we did a couple of video projects. But the equipment back then in the 80s was like huge and bulky, and you know, the tools were not readily accessible like they are now.
What were you using at Sale to make films?
If I can screen share, I actually pulled to show the Sale kids a photograph of a 1983 video camera.
Yeah.
What did I do with it? Here it is. The participant screen sharing is disabled. I think you might have to make me like a co-host or something like that.
I'm not sure how to do
that's okay. I'll just tell you that the cameras were big and bulky, and you needed a giant camera, and then also a separate portable recording deck that was about the size of, I would say, like a large suitcase. Like, you know, like, and you know, our school didn't have that equipment. They would have to like borrow it from the county school system or something, and they would get it for a couple of days, and we would shoot these videos, and we made like a video that was like a commercial for the first film that I ever was part of was a commercial for school libraries, and it was called Discover Your Library. And I helped to conceive the idea. It was a team of us, you know, students, but the idea was that a UFO landed in the courtyard of my high school, and all the aliens were coming out, and these were like my sister and my friends with tinfoil wrapped around their body, spacey, and they were going into the library and stealing all the books and taking out stacks of books. And I was also the star. I was a reporter named Ida Rather. And I was going around, I was interviewing my classmates and saying, what is happening here? Why are these aliens stealing all the books? And I interviewed the alien, you know, captain of the aliens, and they explained that they wanted to learn about the human race, and therefore they were stealing all the books in the library. And that was the spot.
Yeah, that's great. Do you still have a copy of it?
No, and I think that Cecilia Maloney is probably the one person who still has a copy, and she threatens to blackmail me with it on a periodic basis, but you know, is yet to emerge.
So was there something about for those that don't know, Sale is like the alternative high school in Tallahassee. Was there something about the approach there that resonated with you, or that triggered
I mean, I
your
think that
creativity?
one thing that was, you know, Sale embraced all forms of creativity in a fantastic way, and you know, the arts were just as important as the sciences, or you know, there was no real sports program at Sale. Like a lot of high schools, I think in Florida, you know, is all about football and basketball team, and they didn't even have that. There were no teams, and there might be now, I don't know. But when I was there, for whatever reason, I can't even explain why, I don't know, but that was fine for me because I was terrible at sports. I was always the last person picked for, you know, at PE when they were doing the teams. It was like, well, I'll take Mary, but you have to take her friend Joy. Like that was, you know, like we were the last two picked.
Those are always the most successful people in life, I think.
The ones no one wants on their team. I'll show you.
Just wait.
Yep, I showed
I'll
them.
walk on the moon. So when did you first begin, I mean, outside of Sale, making films, and was it something that just sort of continued directly from that, or was there?
Yeah, I mean, when I went to college, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do or be, and I just took a lot of different subjects in my early years, and then I had to pick a major at some point, and I looked at all the choices. I got a scholarship to go to Florida State, and I went to college there and had to pick a major, and one of the choices was, you know, they were just starting the film school then, and actually the first year that I went to Tallahassee Community College first, and then I transferred to Florida State when I was what do you call it, a junior.
Yeah.
And they were only taking freshmen for the film school at Florida State that year because it was their first year as a film school. And so they decided to just like, we're just going to start with freshmen and bring them through the program. And so I was kind of devastated because I wanted to go to film school, but I wasn't eligible. And so
you couldn't, like, flunk out and go back a year.
Maybe. I probably, you know, was like, that'll cost too much money, too much time. Nah. So I started in the communications department. They had a film and television production major. And so I got to take classes, a lot of like film history classes that were, you know, that were part of the film school. I got to take a few film classes, and I also took television production classes. And most of the other students in my classes were, well, I'll put it like this. I think that most of the other girls, young ladies that were in my classes, were taking these classes because they aspired to be like weather girls on the news or something like that. So they wanted to be media savvy. So I was a freak and didn't have a lot of friends. But, you know, it was a way to get my hands on cameras and start doing stuff. And I'm sure that everything that I made was, you know, quite terrible. But, you know, it was an opportunity to play with the toys, you know, and then I graduated, and I had sort of saved the last thing I needed to do to graduate was do an internship. And I did all my classwork, and I saved my internship for the very end. And my sister was living in New York City. And so I went and crashed on her couch and like talked my way into an internship at MTV Networks. And they assigned me to a producer at VH1. And I did an internship, and then I got a job there. And I graduated in 1992. It was like after, 12 years of Reaganomics. So there were not a lot of jobs to be had. I remember when I came back to Florida State to do my graduation walk, and there's, hundreds of graduates there. And I saw someone like, way on the other side of the, it was at the Civic Center, the floor of the Civic Center, like, oh, I saw my friend. And I told her, like, she was like, oh, how was New York? And I was like, it was great. I got a job. And I just saw like hundreds of those black mortar boards, like turned around, like everyone was like, what? You got a job? Like everyone was working at Starbucks, and I got a job working at VH1 for like $500 a week, and tried to live in New York City. I ate a lot of beans and rice and packaged ramen for a few years until I just worked my way up the ladder at VH1, and eventually got to make documentaries for VH1, which was, sort of like my secret goal. And so I did a lot of work for television, VH1 and A&E, and ended up doing some other things for like PBS and ABC and NBC. And but I appreciated working at VH1. It was a great opportunity to really learn, because MTV Networks was a place where you could be young and be a producer. I think I had only worked at VH1 for about 4 years before I got my first producer credit. And a producer in television, especially in cable television, you're writing, you're directing, you're just, they're just sort of like, here's a little bit of money, go make something, and by a little bit of money, I mean like a little bit of money,
right.
Be creative, so it's good because you learn how to be creative with not very much money, and how to you got to do everything, and that's what, documentary filmmaking is always a struggle of resources and time and money. And on the Jimmy Carter film, I was everything from the director to the bicycle messenger, and that's not a joke. I was literally bike messengering, riding my bike across New York City to deliver camera cards, because we couldn't afford to send a messenger, or I didn't have a PA or whatever. It's like you just got to do what you got to do, and make it happen. So
also, well, I guess MTV launched in the 80s, but really at the time you got involved there, it was
young.
Yeah.
For sure. And it was relevant, which it's not anymore.
Yeah, it's just another.
MTV was at a really great place, and VH1 was in this weird place when I first got there, because VH1 was kind of started basically just to block competition. It was like buying beachfront property and just parking a trailer there just so that nobody else builds another hotel next to your hotel, and there were rules about you can't compete with MTV. You can't make something on VH1, even if your boss thinks it's a good idea. Your boss's boss is going to tell you, nah, you can't do that. You're not allowed to. We weren't allowed to play rap. We weren't allowed. It was like the channel of Kenny G and Gloria Stefan and Michael Bolton when I first. That was their bread and butter. And I was like, sure, I can make a documentary about Celine Dion. No problem. When do I start? You know?
Or so you were doing some of the behind the musics?
Well, so behind the music came later, and I did do some of those, but not until I had a career slump and I was forced to. But I started off. There was a series called Legends, and those were my first documentaries. And behind the music was started as like, well, Legends does so well. We should make a series that's about legends, but like for losers, you know, like the Vanillis of the world. And you know, and that's what behind the music started at, and then Legends went away because it was too expensive. And then behind the music took over, and I had like a stint where I had like a fallow period of my career, and I was like, what am I going to do? And VH1 called me and was like, do you want to do a behind the music about Enrique Iglesias? And I was like, oh, hells yeah, bring it. You know, he's hot.
Well, I guess that was great warm up for something like this film, because although everyone thinks Jimmy Carter, it's also rock and roll. So it's as much about the musicians and I suppose the access to the musicians as it is Jimmy.
Right.
It's their relationship with Jimmy. So you really are coming at it, I suppose, more from the music side than the politics side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my background at VH1 got me kind of pegged in this niche of people would think about me for music programming, you know, whether it be a documentary or other entertainment style, you know, television shows. And that was, you know, for a while, that was a great niche to be in. And I'm obsessed with music, and I love it. And I love being able to tell stories about music. But there was a time when, you know, the music industry kind of collapsed a little bit. And whereas it used to be, you know, oh, a record label has no problem throwing millions of dollars into a documentary about their big artists, then it was all of a sudden like, well, are we going to make our money back? And, you know, maybe we shouldn't spend that much money. And then, you know, I guess it became a little bit limiting because people couldn't see me as doing something else, you know, and I kind of purposefully tried to find a way to do other things just so that I could, like when reality television became a big thing, which, you know, I remember getting a call once that like, oh, you know, this friend of mine's doing this new show that, you know, looking for great storytellers, great producers, like maybe you'd be interested in it. It's about, you know, gay guys, and, you know, it's a reality show. And I was like, oh no, I don't do reality TV. Like, no. Okay. Meanwhile, the show was Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, like the most successful show in the history of cable television. I said, no, it's beneath me, you know, no. But there was a moment where I was like, I couldn't get arrested basically. And I was trying to get work on reality shows because that's all the work there was. And I wouldn't even get a call back. You know, I wouldn't even, no one would even give me the time of day because I had never done it before. And like, I was there in the beginning when it wouldn't have mattered that I hadn't done it before because no one had done it before. But then it was like that ship sailed, and I was actually, now I'm grateful that I wasn't on that ship. But there were definitely times.
It might have destroyed your life, you know. I don't know. But you'd have a mansion somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, the thing about it is there's a couple of people that get rich. From, you know, Mark Burnett is very rich, but they survive, those shows survive by like just not paying the worker bees. Like everyone just works their little butts off, and they don't make any money.
Yeah. The salt mines.
Yeah.
The pixel mines. Well, I was going to ask you before we cut to the Sauce Boss, just to maybe kind of outline a little bit of the, I don't know, just how the film itself came into being, and then we'll go to Bill, and then open it up for
Okay.
questions. Yeah.
Well, so I had been talking with a friend of mine, an old friend of mine who I've known for like 20 years, and he's not a filmmaker. His name's Chris Farrell. He's a producer of the film, though, but he was interested in working on a music documentary. He had a background in finance and mergers and acquisitions, and wanted to get involved in something creative. And we started talking about, some different ideas. And basically my problem is like, I always have a million ideas, but like, where do you find the money to make it happen?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I can help you find money. And I was like, well, then let's figure out what's something that, we can both be passionate about, because you have to have a passion to do this kind of thing. Cause there's only a tiny chance that you'll ever have any glory, and you'll never get rich. And, it's just, but it can be really fun, but it's a lot of work, and it has to be something that you can be passionate about. And he's the one actually that heard about this aspect of Jimmy Carter's life and his sort of fandom of music, which I never knew about. And he called me and one day, and he had been in Atlanta. He was actually he was sort of pursuing the idea of doing a documentary about the Allman Brothers with another producer. And they met these guys down in Atlanta that they thought might give them some funding for an Allman Brothers documentary, or might help connect them to, they knew that they would be interested in trying to get Jimmy Carter in an Allman Brothers documentary if they were able to get it made. So they met these guys that could connect them to Jimmy Carter and potentially connect them to some, funding sources down there in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And it turned out it was some of the folks that are in our film. Tom Beard and Peter Conlon, who worked for President Carter. And they shared all these stories about Carter and his friendship with Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson and Greg Allman. And Chris called me and was just like, I found an idea that I think you're going to be really interested in. And I think because of your Southern background, he also is from North Florida. He's from Jacksonville. But he just thought that, a Southern sensibility was kind of key to it. And when we first, so he and I developed the treatment together. We spent several months obsessing over writing this treatment, that put together a presentation that went to Carter. And Carter, we found out that he was interested in it. And then Chris's job was to go and find the money for it. And a lot of people, well, I don't know about a lot, but several, more than one person told him that he would never be able to raise the money for the film with me as the director, because I wasn't famous enough, and that he needed to get someone who was more of a household name, if not Martin Scorsese, then, I don't know, Alex Gibney or,
Morgan Freeman, somebody like that.
Exactly. And
not Morgan Freeman, Morgan Neville.
Morgan Neville.
Yeah. Morgan Freeman, whatever.
Anyone with a famous name, they're like, investors are not going to give you the money. And, to his credit, I think he had more confidence in himself and his own abilities, than, anything. And that helped him to have the strength to sort of be like, well, I'm not sure that's true. But also I think that, I guess he just sort of felt that we would make a good team. And I sort of lost there was something else I was going to say in regards to this, but basically he just he just didn't believe them. And he's just like, I think that, he believed in me, essentially. And I'll be forever grateful to him for that. But so it took like about a year to eventually raise all the money. And in the meanwhile, he was able to come up with a little bit of money so that we could start shooting. And we were able to get a date on President Carter's calendar to shoot his first interview. And while we were in Atlanta, we shot another batch of interview with like his son and the sort of inner circle guys that are in the film. We shot a couple of days in Atlanta. And then it was like, another like 8 months of trying to find the money and doing little bits and pieces of things as we could. And we got like Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood, and we got Willie Nelson. We got a few of our, early interview. We got Roseanne Cash, and Nile Rodgers, who were, Jimmy Buffett, all were like really great and key interviews. And then finally Chris was able to like, raise the rest of the money. And then we spent another year after that, like finishing the film, which is actually for documentary standards that it only took us 2 years to make, from start to finish is quite fast.
I guess there must have been a lot of nervousness because of Jimmy's age and some of the, he's 95 or something. It's like the precarious nature of his health.
Yeah, for sure.
To be able to be on camera, so.
Yeah, there were a couple of scares in the course of us making the film, where he had a fall at one point, and one of the things that Carter was really, really excited about this film from the beginning, and Chris made a promise to him that he would make sure to get this film made and done in time for President Carter to see it. And there was a lot of pressure in that, not just on him, but on me too, that we felt that pressure. And when there was a moment when we thought he wouldn't be able to see it. And I'm sorry. It's funny. I get emotional sometimes.
No, of course.
I think about when we were able to finally go to show President Carter the finished film. It was such an emotional moment because he cried. He cried like 3 times, and he was like blubbering at the end of the movie. And that was kind of amazing. And he was so happy. He's just so happy with the film, and that's really just one of the most the biggest, most gratifying experiences of my life, for sure.
Wow. Well, I was going to ask your dad if he wanted to play a couple of tunes from his
play some songs.
What's the name of your studio, Bill? Has it got a name? Swamp Studios?
Oh, Dad, you're muted.
Oh, that's my fault. Let me.
We call it Swamp Side.
Swamp Side. All right.
Swamp Side. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, Bill Wharton, the Sauce Boss, and Mary's father, who contributed a lot of the soundtrack music for the film, is going to play a couple of things for us now.
Swamp Side is a studio that I just completed, and it's named after a place down on the Osceola River, between the Osceola and the Wassissa, where me and my partner had a clandestine horticulture thing. It was a kind of a little hill in the middle of a huge swamp. And that story is continuing here. On the sunny side, alligator. I'm gonna get you high. Alligator. Just like a pair of shoes. Alligator. You got the 12 gauge blues. Alligator. Alligator. Way down in the swamp. Alligator. I'm gonna get my wish. Alligator. You're my favorite dish. Oh, alligator.
All right.
It's so nice to see you guys going like that. I just broke a pick. Hold on. I got
That's one of my favorite, all-time favorite Sauce Boss tunes.
Really? I had a great time recording it, and it was great to hear it in the movie. Working with Mary was one of the best things that had ever happened to me musically. She had a great team, the squad, mostly women. And here's a song, I don't think you've even heard this song, Mary.
Cool.
This is, I used just the movie was, they used just the introduction to this song. And by way of introduction, it's like, the song is called Shiner's Blues. And it's about a gentleman I met in Tennessee. He was a moonshiner. And his grandfather's grandfather's grandfather brought a whiskey still from Ireland before the Revolutionary War. And they settled in the Smoky Mountains. And my father got to be good friends with his because my dad was he was an educator, but he retired. He was also a woodworker, and he did some projects restoring the water wheel at Cage Cove in the mill, and and he got to end with the locals. And this guy had a still that he built and operated, and he tore down all under the gaze of the revenuers. Nobody ever caught him for that.
Charlie was a shiner through and through, way up on the mountain, doing what shiners do. Learned the business early by his mother's side, paid the price so dearly, they laughed and they cried. Charlie's mother, Molly, had to make her own till the kid was grown. Put her in the jailhouse, baby came along, 180 days rolled up their happy home. You can't keep the bus head, keep all that perfume. I prefer to have a little whiskey to consume. No one can refuse me, no one can assume. If you know better whiskey, let it travel round the room. Charlie was a shiner on my home. Time he took right the time he had to make it. He became a man, wouldn't have been for trouble, messed up the perfect plan. Weren't for all the running, weren't for the copper still. They weren't for all that whiskey, he had stashed up on the hill. It was all about woman and a jealous husband's rage. That's how Charlie Williams spent a hard time in a cage, yeah. Well, I've been around the country, across the pond, and I'm afraid never had a better drink than the one that Charlie made. Sipping on a front porch, kind enough to share, smoking mountain whiskey. Hey, look there. Ah, go look out. Yeah, he knew the long term whistle. He knew the long term sound. From the log train on the mountain and the passengers in town. Riverboat Tallahassee made that steamer sound. I hate to see the sun go down. Can't keep the bus head, all that you do. Lord, I want some whiskey to consume. No one can refuse me, and no one can assume. There's no better whiskey, let it travel around the room.
Hey.
Hey.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
You dig it, Mary?
I dig it. You know, my grandpa used to always tell stories about that shiner that like he had some kind of crazy like James Bond style hidden
This guy was a genius.
skill.
He had, get this, like I say, the revenuers, well, they put his mother in prison, right? So they had their eyes on him. But he built this thing, and he cooled it in his swimming pool. Yeah. I can't hear you, Meg, but I saw that wow. He pulled it, put it in the swimming pool, and it's kind of, one time my dad was over there. He called my father the professor. He says, "Hey, professor, I want to show you something." So they walked from his house to this old funky shed. And he said, "Go over and stand in the corner there." And my father did that. And Charlie reached up and he flipped a switch. And the floor where my father was standing goes like that, down underground. And this place, you walk into the place and there's like an old boat, dust, dirt everywhere. And you go down in the elevator and it's clean as a hospital. 200 gallons still, and he used kerosene, and so there was no smell. Cooled it in a swimming pool, and
Didn't
the
Uncle
guy,
Pete have the moonshine tested for heavy metals, and it was like 99.9% pure
oh
or
yeah,
something like
this was
that?
not,
Super
yeah, this was
pristine,
not the bus head.
high end moonshine.
Yeah, he was an amazing man, genius. Oh, his memoir is an incredible read. It's called Memoir of a Mountaineer. If you
Wow.
want a good read, the guy, he was put in jail. It's a long story, but he made money when he was in jail by writing romance novels.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
But I mean, his story is like, you know, the teens and the 20s of the last century. I mean, he was right for a guy out of the Smoky Mountains. He was incredibly hip and just had his pulse on the finger of it, if you will. You know, the guy was amazing. Anyway, that's Charlie Williams.
I love it. And that song is featured on the soundtrack of Jimmy
Yeah.
Carter, Rock and Roll President.
Yep.
Wow, that was killer.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that, man.
So if folks want to ask a question, just do this little hand clap sign, and I will, and then unmute yourself, and then, rather, I will ask you to unmute, and then you can ask a question, just to avoid sonic overlaps and stuff. Anybody out there want to ask anything? If not, I'll continue. But
Well, I have. I wish I could share my photos, but I was looking at them quickly just to sort of remind myself if of like some good stories, and one of them was actually just about because I do have a picture of the Sauce Boss in the recording studio in New York City when we brought him in to record some score, and that was super fun. But the story that I wanted to tell about bringing my dad into to the picture was I think, you know, kind of fraught in a way, because you know, we hadn't worked before together, and you know, although I knew that my dad's music, you know, he has a very distinctive sound, for those of you who are, you know, just heard him play now, and I wasn't sure that I knew that sound would be good in places, but I wasn't sure that it would be, that we would want like the whole movie to have that distinctive sound. But I asked him to send me, you know, whatever kind of instrumental piece of music that he had already, that we could just try some things. And you know, the thing, there were definitely like pieces of his music that I had totally forgotten about, or maybe just wasn't even really all that familiar with certain songs that he sent me. And I think the first piece of music that we placed, you know, for those of you who have seen the movie already, is very early in the movie, when it's right after Nile Rodgers and Willie Nelson read a piece of Jimmy Carter's poetry, and it's a poem called Plains, and at the end of the poem, Willie is reading the last line and he's just like, well, that's beautiful. And he sets the book down, and then we go to, we just want to sort of live in a moment in Plains. We're like setting the scene of Plains, Georgia. And we had been down there and shot a bunch of footage of the farm that Carter grew up on, which is now a National Historic Site. And there's chickens roaming around in the yard, and it's exactly as if it was when his family lived there. And there's this beautiful piece of music that my dad had sent us that the editor chose and placed there. And it was like, just that one piece of music was the thing that I was like, oh, this could really work, you know, because it's beautiful, and it's like the first piece of score music in the movie, and it works perfectly to set the scene, because, you know, we didn't want it to be like, okay, now we're down in Georgia and we're gonna hear a banjo. Like, this is not Deliverance, you know. You know, and I didn't, you know, obviously, like the title Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President, rock and roll is not the only kind of music in the film. It's also about jazz and it's about country. But, you know, we were purposeful in choosing the title rock and roll, because we wanted to convey that attitude of rock and roll, that would be surprising. Whereas, like, it wouldn't be surprising to hear like Jimmy Carter was the country president, you know, or even that he's a fan of country music. Like, it's almost like, especially for people from outside the South, the idea is that everyone in the South, you know, sits around playing banjos or something, you know, it is not that far-fetched to them, you know. And so I wanted something early in the movie that didn't sound like country and didn't sound too Americana, too rootsy, you know, Southern sounding. And I forget the name of the track that song is. Dad, do you remember that plays in
the Song of the Irish Band?
Yes, that's what it is. Yes. And it was just perfect. And so I called my dad and I was like, you know, do you think you want to do some score, you know, some original score for us, you know, in addition to these pieces of music? And he was totally game for it. And I sent him a scene we were working on, which ended up not even being in the film.
Hey, Mary, can I break in here?
Yeah, tell.
When Mary calls me, she says, I think I'm going to need some more music. And I'd been thinking about, you know, I'd already sent you some stuff, right? And I was thinking about Jimmy Carter and his smile and his whole thing about always being up when he was president and that kind of thing. And I knew that some days Jimmy Carter had to take a smile and paste it on his face because of the worry or whatever of the presidency. And I'd been working with this little riff, a guitar riff. And at that moment when Mary called me, I had nothing. Okay. And I said, Mary, I got a great tune. It's called Smile in a Basket. And I don't know where that came from, but the tune actually was written after that phone call.
You know,
go ahead, man.
And it's amazing. But, you know, it was funny because I kind of felt like we were like, I don't know, like co-conspirators in concocting some grand scheme to take over the world or something. Because
I like your analogy of you were the monkey with the keys.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that was one of the great things about this film. Was really the first time in my career that I had some real creative control. In my work in television, I don't really ever get creative control. I get to put forth my vision and hope that they like it. But if they don't, I just have to change it until they do, until they are happy. And this was, and I kept, it was a weird feeling to have that control. It's like getting behind the wheel of a car for the first time. And you're like, well, I hope I know how to drive, And I kept saying, like, I feel like I'm the monkey in the zoo who just put on the zookeeper jacket and they gave me the keys, and I'm acting like the zookeeper, but, I'm really just a monkey in a jacket, Let's hope they don't find out. But yeah, it was such a joy to be able to collaborate on the music and handing back scenes and get working together, and I would give him feedback on the music and he would give me feedback on the cuts that he was watching. That I would send him rough cuts to see how it the music was playing, and he would always be very deferential and try not to be harshly critical, but then he would just every now and then give me these like incredibly insightful notes that were super helpful. Sometimes you get a little bit in the course of making a documentary where you have a hard time seeing the forest through the trees, and you're so kind of in this tunnel vision of I don't know, you get too close to things, and having someone come in with fresh eyes is often very key to helping to see where your holes are and where your flaws are, and that's important. So it was really cool to have my dad be those fresh eyes every now and then.
Wow. Well, what do you remember your parents, Bill and Ruth, playing music for you when you were tiny little kid? What were they playing?
Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. I remember a lot of Frank Zappa. I think I learned how to swear by listening to Frank Zappa records, actually. A lot of Bob Dylan. I remember Blood on the Tracks is still to this day one of my favorite Dylan records. And I didn't realize that he had this whole other catalog that happened before I was born, as most people think invented with their birth, but yeah, I only much later in life learned about like Bob Dylan's more popular music. I still think that Tangled Up in You is the best song he ever wrote. But yeah, I mean, my dad has still to this day has an epic record collection, and I would get into trouble all the time for scratching the records or leaving them not put back in the right case. And yeah, like I said before, we didn't have a television most of my life, but there was always various forms of music, whether it was records or my dad had a reel-to-reel machine that would play copies of records that were on reel-to-reel tapes. And I always loved that sound of the reel running out at the end. Yeah, and I think when I was about, I don't know, I want to say when I was about 12 or 13, I called up a radio station and was listening to the radio, and they had like some kind of trivia contest, and the prize was a 1-year subscription to Rolling Stone magazine. And I won the prize, and I got Rolling Stone delivered to my house once a month, and I would read that magazine until it fell apart over and over again. Like I was obsessed.
Was this when it was still like the large form magazine
Yeah.
without the
Yeah.
staples, I think?
No, it wasn't. This was after. So this would have been in the early 80s. And so it was like, it wasn't like newsprint.
Oh, okay.
It was a glossy magazine, but a big glossy magazine. And like, I remember one of the first covers I got was a shot of Jim Morrison, and the headline was, Jim Morrison, he's sexy, he's hot, he's dead. And I was like, well, that's what it means to be a rock star, you know, hot, sexy, and dead, you know.
And there, your whole career just sort of
it just writes itself.
Your entire life.
At that point, this movie writes itself.
What was I was kind of curious. Well, you kind of intimated some of it talking about being with Jimmy Carter as you watched the film, but what did you feel like when you finally got to meet him and do the interviews? I mean, how did you?
Nervous?
You know, yeah, I wonder. You know, like we all do. I mean, whether you're a journalist or a filmmaker,
You
whatever.
doing okay?
You're often coming into contact with people who are celebrities or famous, but
right
on a
So
certain
you're feeling better?
level, you're not as
I love you too.
we love you also.
We all love you.
But you know, then there are people, everyone has those people that are just so
right.
They're, you know,
Right.
so obviously I would think what did it feel like? I mean, was you have butterflies, you were nervous, or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've met a lot of rock stars, but I'd never met a president before,
Yeah.
you know. I was definitely nervous. You know, Jimmy Carter kind of has this persona of being, you know, he's got that smile, that $1 million smile, right? And he comes across as very genuine and very friendly, which he is, but he's also, you know, at the time that we first interviewed him, he was still very active in the work of the Carter Center and a very busy man. You know, he was like scheduled out for months in advance. And basically it wasn't like, oh, come, you know, sit down for a while, let's hang out and get to know each other. It's like, okay, you have an hour. At this time, he's going to walk in the room and he'll probably be early. And if you're not ready for him when he shows up, he will get impatient. And that's not how you want to start this. So like, be ready. And you have an hour. And, you know, to get an hour with the president is a pretty big deal. So we were like, great. And you know, he wasn't wearing a watch to my knowledge, but at 55 minutes, he was like, so we're about to wrap up.
Oh, right? I hate it.
Like he knows when an hour is up. And like, you know, the first interview went really pretty smoothly until, from the back of the room, I heard a loud snoring sound, and I realized that my lighting guy, who had been up all night the night before shooting Stranger Things or something, he was like, you know, doing something like that, had fallen asleep in the back of the room.
Oh no!
And I was like kicking his chair, like, what, you know, but you know, we moved past that. But no, the first interview was like really stressful, but he really did light up when he kind of saw that we just wanted to talk about music. And when he started talking about music, his face lit up, and it was great, and he was great, and we got what we needed. And then, you know, we went on about our business of making the film. And then we were lucky enough to get a second interview with him, which was, you know, the one which is what we opened the film with, when he sits down and at the record player and plays a record. And this was like my grand idea for the opening of the film. And I will admit tonight that I didn't have another idea. This was my idea. and I said to Carter's staff, like, you know, do you think that he'll be willing to do this? Like, I wanted to like film him coming into the room, and they're like, no, he's not going to walk with you filming him, because he doesn't want to look like an old man, you know, walking in an unsteady way or anything like that. But like, you know, I was like, all right, well, so we'll have the camera set up. We won't follow him. We'll bring him in. We'll ask him to play some records. I had chosen some records that I thought he might respond to and brought them with me.
That was so good.
And,
that was so good.
And, you know, it's a funny thing to try to direct a president. And he came, and you know, I explained to him my big idea, and he was not really feeling it at first. He was kind of like, what, you know, and I was like, oh, it's all set up. It's right here. You know, we can even decide right now, like which record. I showed him what I had, and, you know, and he picked the Dylan record, and I was like, great. Now I have to clear that song. Okay. No pressure.
That's the other
like, and I thought, well, maybe we'll try it a couple times, you know, just in case we clear the Dylan song. And he was like, no, we're done here, you know. But again, what was great is like he did it, and as soon as he heard the music, it was like his smile is like megawatt smile, you know. It just, his whole body lights up the room like you know, a stage light. And he pulled it off, and I was like, okay. I was so grateful that we had it, and then I had to go and clear the song.
One mountain climbed, and the next mountain comes.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask you, like, I mean, is it a matter of him being so busy, or just being at his age, like?
No, he's a Navy guy. He's a very much like schedule oriented kind of guy. I did not get the impression that he was tired at the end of the hour. And, you know, talking for an hour is exhausting. You know, I can tell you, you know, but it wasn't that, I don't think. I mean, I think he really legitimately had like other things. Like it really wasn't until the pandemic hit that he slowed down, you know, because he was forced to. And even before that, like in October of 2019, he had a fall and broke his hip, and he was 94 or something, 94, 95 at that point. And he had hip surgery, and he was literally getting out of bed and walking down the hall within a week. And, you know, everyone was like amazed.
He's a superhuman like entity.
Superhuman, but also like I think it's like he had a lot to to fucking do. Pardon my French. You know, like he saw there were so many problems in the world and he was not going to sit around and waste time. He was like ready to, you know, when do we start this physical therapy thing? And I think, you know, in you know, to a certain extent with like the time that he was going to devote to this little movie that we were making.
Right. That's the time
there
you
were
could
just
be
way more important things
saving the world.
for him to
Yeah.
do. And I think that, you know, I never was particularly religious person in terms of, you know, in our family, we don't adhere to a particular brand of organized religion. But I've always sort of been somewhat spiritual in believing in, you know, that there is a higher power of some kind. I just never knew how to put a name to it or whatever. But I never had a lot of faith in humanity, really. And I think that Jimmy Carter restored my faith in humanity because he's just such an incredibly powerful person in that you don't meet people often who are willing to put themselves in peril, whether that be political peril, you know, who are willing to commit career suicide on a regular basis
Right.
in the interest of doing what's best for the greater good of humanity.
Well, we often don't see that in these times.
No, and Jimmy Carter has done that again and again and again. And, you know, it's the man, you know, until he broke his hip and couldn't properly walk without a walker, he was building homes for homeless people around the world.
At an age when most people are dead, you know, it's like amazing.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. That's you were crying earlier, and I'm almost ready to start myself.
I swear to God, I have seen the movie like more than 100 times, and it still makes me cry every time I see it because he's just such an incredibly inspiring person to me, and I just feel so blessed to have had an opportunity to, you know, even if I never got to meet him, I would feel blessed to have been able to make this movie. But, you know, the fact that I did get to meet him and you know, it's really a truly special honor. And he called me actually on the morning after the CNN broadcast, just to tell me, you know, to thank me and thank me and the crew, everyone involved in the movie, because he was so pleased with it. And he asked me if I had fun, you know, watching it on CNN. And I was like, yeah, did you have fun? He's like, yeah. And I said, President Carter, I hear that you're trending on Twitter this morning.
Wow.
And I said, I'm not on Twitter, so I don't really know what that means. And he said, I don't know what that means either. And we had a good laugh about.
That's amazing.
You know.
Well, somebody else isn't on Twitter now either. So. Hey, we had a couple of questions from the gallery here.
Bring it.
Going to my left, Meg has a question.
Yeah, well, I loved the movie. I just think you deserve a medal for doing that, just even for him. I'm so happy to hear he cried. And it's kind of a good segue, I think, because, you know, you were talking about him being a good human being. And, you know, by the end of the movie, I kept thinking, like, this should be an educational, in schools, in college, like, where are you going to try to get this movie to go? Because I really think so many people would enjoy learning about a president that I feel like he's so forgotten sometimes. And
yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, where I don't make movies, I just watch movies. Like, where are you going to try to push this film? so that more people see it?
So, it'll be available on Amazon and, those streaming services for a good, I can't remember, I think it's 10 years or something like that is that distribution deal. And then our distributor, who control the United States rights, they also are making deals for airlines if there are any airlines. I don't know if that's been sorted out yet, but obviously like Delta being based in Atlanta is a really obvious target for that. And yeah, educational, the thing is, schools have to kind of ask for it, really, and so getting the word out with an independent documentary, it's just tough, and we, typically, I think that, you would rely on a good performance in the theaters to help, kind of push the sales in other areas. And we, put this movie out in the middle of a pandemic when all the theaters were closed. So it was, sort of like bad timing, good timing, in bad timing on a financial end of things, but good timing because I think a lot of people needed it. The people that have seen it have been, it's been really nice to hear those kind of reactions. But yeah, I mean, we're doing everything that we can to help, kind of keep promoting it, and we're selling it around the world. And those deals are, they just take time, and they're happening. And there's, I think that there's a really good chance that once I think there's a good chance that this film is going to have a really long shelf life. And that, once the CNN they have an exclusive broadcast window on it for a certain period of time, and then it can go to other places. And we've been talking with the Carter Center about, doing stuff with them. So it's sort of a hodgepodge of things because, we had hoped originally that we would sort of sell it to a place like a Netflix that would just take the whole world and get it out there for us. But it's hard. It's hard to get people to pay attention to documentaries in today's world,
Well, I wish you luck.
Thank you.
Just loved it.
Thanks so much for watching.
Yeah.
Might want to unmute, Steve.
Hey, Sam.
There you go.
Yeah, moderator here. Kim, did you have a question as well?
Hey, Mary. I actually have not seen the show yet. I can't wait. I was really moved by your talking about just getting to meet Jimmy Carter. I was born in Atlanta. I know to parents from New Jersey. So Jimmy Carter's like the first president I really ever I knew who the other presidents were, but he was the first guy who was like, the president, and he's from Georgia, like I'm from Georgia. And I was like, it was so exciting. And he's also just become like the best president, like the best former president we ever had, like the best person.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it probably is in the film if there's any of it, but I'm so moved by hearing you talk about, working with your own dad, and Jimmy Carter's a father of a daughter, and just was there any I don't know. I just wonder was he uniquely proud of you as a gal, I suppose, as a gal filmmaker doing your thing, or I don't know, just it seems like there's such a moment there where, I mean, I think he must have appreciated the fact that you were a female director, like, and just, I
Well,
don't know, maybe.
Jimmy Carter was a big supporter of the ERA in the 70s, even though it was
Me too. I still
ratified.
want it.
But he also, one of the things that's not in the film, but we couldn't really quite find a way to work it in, and mostly because I couldn't find a musical connection to this one piece of Carter's story. And one of the things that was important about sort of maintaining the premise of this film, that there was always some kind of musical connection to the stories that we tell, because we knew that we had to stay true to that premise. Otherwise we would get like bashed for like, well, it's a flimsy premise, and, clearly they couldn't quite maintain it for the whole film, But so one of the things that I was so admired about Carter, though, is that he was very instrumental during his administration in helping to foster democracy in Latin America, which at the time there were a lot of think about like Pinochet in Argentina, a lot of CIA installed dictators all over Latin America. And Jimmy Carter helped to, sort of not pressure, but convince some of these dictators to allow free and fair elections, like in Panama and in Nicaragua. And part of how he was able to do that is he was scheduled to go on a diplomatic mission around Latin America, and something came up and he wasn't able to go, and he sent Mrs. Carter in his place. And she went, and he later said that she was tougher on these Latin American dictators than he would have ever had the courage to be. And she asked those, generals and whatever to be
SOBs.
So what are you going to do about letting your people vote in this country for free and, fair,
that's so awesome,
elected leaders? And she had a voice in the White House. She had a seat at the table in a way that was unheard of before that. I think that Eleanor Roosevelt certainly was a powerful first lady, but Rosalind Carter was a strong first lady who played a part in real serious policy work of the Carter administration, and I admired that a lot. And I got all this footage of her trip around Latin America, and there's all this beautiful, amazing footage, but there was no musical connection or no way for me to find a way to weave that into my film. So we had to leave that on the cutting room floor. But I think that Carter is a strong supporter of women's rights, and was, I never had an opportunity to really talk to him about that, but I did feel, it was interesting, like when we first started making the film, and we had just very limited interaction with him. As I said, you have an hour, and then 4 months later we had another hour. And there's a lot of people that he meets that day, and I'm the director, and I'm clearly in charge of the shoot. But also I had a good friend of mine, the writer, Bill Flanagan. I brought him in to help me with doing the interviews. He was the person who was actually asking the questions, and that's why you actually do in the film, you hear his voice asking Carter's son, Chip, did your dad ever play a musical instrument? And it's one of the great moments of the film. Chip's answer, he thinks about it for a minute, and he's like, the stereo. We had a kick-ass stereo.
Nice.
That's not how he said it, but that's the message.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Just one quick, so, also obviously you shot everything way before all of this, but you know, the climate in Atlanta, I mean, just the music scene in Atlanta has been truly instrumental, I think, in galvanizing, you know, the people of Georgia. I mean, clearly it's like we owe our current administration to Georgia. Like, thank you,
props
Georgia.
to Georgia,
Like,
for sure.
go Georgia. And I mean, Killer Mike totally was on it, you know, a bunch of artists, and, you know, and it's just like, I mean, galvanizing not just people of color, but also, you know, the demographics of Georgia are changing, and like, it's just so exciting. It's such an exciting time for, you know, Georgia as a state. And I think it's like, and I think, you know, it's like, I wonder if Jimmy Carter you know, I mean, obviously he's very involved and the Carter Center is there, and obviously, you know, but like, any thoughts about the Georgia angle?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, it's interesting, you know, Georgia, some of the greatest, you know, soul music of all time came out of Georgia, and Jimmy Carter was well aware of the impact that, you know, R&B and soul had on helping to bring people together during the civil rights era, and the, you know, that like music had the one of the messages of the film really is a love letter to the power that music has to bring us together and make us realize that we all have a lot more in common than we all are different, and that, you know, we all want to dance to the same music and sing the same songs together. And Jimmy Carter was really cognizant of that. And, you know, one of the interesting things that Nile Rodgers talks about in the film, you know, the fact that James Brown was from Georgia. And, you know, he says, you know, as a Black musician, you can't help but be influenced by the music and the lyrics of James Brown. And when James Brown says, you know, Augusta, Georgia, you know, and he shouts out like all the, you know, that he's from Augusta, Georgia, and Nile Rodgers does a much better job of explaining this than I am right now. But he, you know, as someone who grew up in the North, a Black musician who grew up in the North, he didn't think about Georgia in the same way because of as he thought about the rest of the South, because of the music that was coming out of Georgia. And I think that has a strong impact, you know, like Otis Redding and the sounds that were coming out of, you know, Macon. You know, the Allman Brothers was an interracial band, and a time when that was not that common. And, you know, you think of it like, it's funny because I actually got into a heated discussion at one point with my editor of the film, talking about, you know, well, as a white person in the South, you know, you can't speak to racism in the way that, you know, a Black person can. And you know, I wasn't trying to argue that, but I did say, because she was trying to say that one of the members of the Allman Brothers band, Chuck Leavell, that, like, you know, speaking to what it was like for Black people in the South during, you know, the 70s, and what she didn't know, because she grew up in New York City, is like, I was like, but you have to also understand that a bunch of long-haired hippies in the South had just as much chance of getting beat up by rednecks as a Black guy did, you know, and I saw that with my own two eyes, you know. I seen long-haired hippies get beat up by rednecks, you know, in front of me, you know.
There's a whole Broadway musical about it, you know.
Right. So I was like, especially like long-haired hippies hanging out in a band with a bunch of Black guys. Like that's not so cool when it comes to the KKK in the South in the 70s, you know. And you might think that things had changed by Jimmy Carter's time, you know, but he tells a story about, you know, the Ku Klux Klan showing up to a campaign rally of his. And I remember when I first heard the story, I thought he was talking about something that must have happened in the 1976 campaign. And when I did the research, and we were having a hard time like finding footage of it, because I was looking in 1976, and it was actually in 1980 when he was running for re-election that the Klan showed up at his rally. And it's kind of surprising that, you know, even in 1980, that the Klan was that strong that they would show up. And, you know, and then all this is happening. We're editing this film about this stuff while what's going on in America is, you know, Charlottesville was happening that same summer when we were editing the film, you know. So it was like incredible how relevant everything in the film was. Like, I would be working on a section about the Iranian hostage crisis, and I would open up the newspaper that day and it would be about Iran. Or, you know, we were talking about, you know, relations with China and how Carter opened up, you know, normalized relations with China. And then it would be like, oh, trade war with China in the paper today. Like every day it was like something relevant to what's going on in the movie 40 years ago is happening in America today. And it just, you know, goes to prove that old adage that people who don't pay attention to history are destined to repeat it.
Doomed.
Right? I mean,
doomed.
Exactly.
And also that history doesn't repeat itself. History rhymes.
Ooh.
Right? Ooh. Ooh.
Hey, Mary, thank you for your questions, Kim. Those were great. Oh, Larry Smith has raised his hand. Let me go find Larry Smith here. There's Larry. Let me unmute Larry. Unmute yourself, Mr. Smith.
Hi. Hey, great film. Thoroughly loved it.
Thank you.
I was wondering, was the Greg Allman footage, was that actually interviews that were already in the can? Because, I mean,
he passed away in 2017, I believe. Right. And yes, we were.
That was already existing footage, right?
It was. We were lucky enough that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame had done an interview with him shortly before, maybe like a year before he died. They had an exhibit about the confluence of music and politics, and they asked him all about that you know, story. And our writer Bill Flanagan is involved with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he had you know, been involved in that exhibit, so he knew about this interview, and that's the only way we would have found it, known to even look for it or ask for it. So
that's terrific that you
lucky.
I mean, it really, you know, dovetailed beautifully. Another question I had is, it really is a truly remarkable piece of filmmaking, and it's the kind of thing that if it hadn't been a CNN presentation, right, you know, like a big national TV CNN presentation, it's the kind of thing that I'd expect to see at a Sundance or something like that. So do you still have the opportunity to submit it to things like Sundance and other film festivals? Is there any
so we were actually we were supposed to be the opening night film of the Tribeca Film Festival last year, and that was you know the thing that we were going to do, and that was a huge honor to be selected as the opening night film. And unfortunately, the festival was canceled because of the pandemic, and it was very early because it was scheduled for April of 2020. And so a lot of festivals kind of pivoted to a virtual online format, but Tribeca was so early on, they didn't know what to do or how to do that. It just got canceled. South by Southwest was also canceled at the last minute. And so we were able to, we had also been selected as closing night film for AFI, which is the American Film Institute, has a film festival, AFI Docs, and we were closing night film there. We were at the Nantucket Film Festival and a number of other festivals. the thing about like a major festival like Sundance is they will only take your film if it's a world premiere. So once it's been out, if anyone's seen it, it's over. Like, and you know, like even like we had wanted to get the film out sooner. We certainly applied to Sundance and didn't get in. But you know, Sundance is like the most competitive film festival in the world, and I think they're probably like, this past year was once again, or not, the year that we submitted, which was, you know, 2020, that they had like something like 5,000 films submitted for 150 slots. And, you know, so, but I do think that there's, you know, we actually just got invited to be part of a documentary film festival in Copenhagen next month. So super excited for that. I wish that I could go and be there, but you know, my film will go in my stead.
And is there any buzz yet in the awards circuit?
You know, the awards circuit is a funny thing, and it's been a little bit of an eye-opening experience for me to learn. I mean, I guess I always suspected that it was all about money, but apparently you just have to hire the right publicist if you want to get awards. And we have no budget to spend on an awards campaign. And I'm told that the documentary that won the Oscar for Best Documentary last year had a $15 million Oscar campaign budget. I'm sure the film didn't cost that much money, but that's what they spent to market it to Oscar voters. So we don't have a lot of hope for that. But, you know, there's the Emmys, there's the Grammys, there's a lot of, there's the Peabodys, you know, which I think we have a solid shot at a Peabody.
So speaking of Grammys too, is the soundtrack, is that being promoted in any way?
Well, yes, the soundtrack, the Sauce Boss has just released a soundtrack record. And tell us about that, Sauce Boss.
Well, I've got the tunes that were featured. I picked, gosh, I think 13 or 14 of them to release on an album, which will be released the 1st of next month.
Oh, it's coming soon.
Great.
And yeah, and I'm really excited about it. The album's called Peanuts. And it's a, it starts with, it's basically a very diverse retrospective with a lot of the early stuff, blues and that kind of stuff. And then there's also some stuff that's orchestrated that I've done with this guy, David Davidson, who is a string arranger in Nashville. There's a couple tunes that are, you know, acoustic with an orchestra, a small orchestra. And so it's a real, and there's also a live song from the Green Parrot in Key West. So, I mean, it's a slice of all different aspects of what I've done. Yeah, we're right now in the process of just starting the promotion of that for to get it out to radio stations and whatnot. And that's basically what I've got going on.
All right.
Yeah, and the actually, you're talking about awards. Mary got by the the Los Angeles Film Awards, gave her Best Picture, Best Documentary, and
Best Score.
Well,
composer.
I got the Best Score, and they also got the Best Editing from Mary Gonzalez. So there's been some of that, but I mean, I'm really to be part of this has blown my mind from the beginning. But what Mary and Mary, how is Mary? Mary and Mari, and also Sue, the sound engineer, did an incredible job of making the music really alive in this movie, you know. And so it was an incredible opportunity for me to just kind of get my stuff out there, you know.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah.
Oh, my friend Jody here. Let me you have to unmute yourself and fire away.
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
I love the film, and I'm an editor, and I was jealous of your editor.
She's badass.
She is badass. She's really good. I wondered, how did you get the support from CNN? Did you just like get in touch with Zucker and, you know, say, Jeff?
Yeah, I called him up. Yeah.
You could actually. But, and how
We
much did they help?
actually they bought the finished film, but
Oh, wow.
we did ask for some small trims. So the CNN version was a little, you know, maybe like 2 minutes shorter than the theatrical version. But I thought that their, you know, their support for the film was fantastic, in that they had just the ultimate respect for, you know, what we had created, and were like super respectful in the way that they asked for you know, a few minor changes, which were so minor that I was happy to accommodate, you know, but also just in terms of like the way that they promoted it, the way they believed in it, was huge. And they came, you know, kind of into the process when we were first shopping it around. They were early and eager to buy the film. And at first I resisted it, because I was like, I don't know. I come from a television background, and for my movie to be, I wanted it to be a theatrical film, and we were lucky that we were able to get a theatrical deal in addition to the CNN deal. But then it just didn't work out that we got to really have truly that theatrical thing. Although there were some real world theaters that played it in Georgia and Texas and Florida. Had some theaters open in the beginning of the pandemic, but CNN was like just so great. You know, the folks at CNN Films were so just persistent and very you know, just I guess open-hearted about their love for the film.
And you weren't afraid that they were going to make all kinds of changes and whatnot? I mean, I work for a network too. I get it. Right. And I would never want my film to go to the network.
Well, that was part of the, you know, negotiation process in terms of whether or not we were going to give it to them. Was that was all what the changes were going to be was agreed upon before we signed a deal.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
So, yeah, I mean, granted, they have a even shorter version of the film that, like, if you watch the rerun, which is going to happen again soon, I think on the 30th of January, it's going to be rerun on CNN. But that version is like 11 minutes cut out of it. And I can't recommend that you watch that version. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, it's fine. It's just like some of the really, you know, we had to cut some, it was a little bit like like Sophie's Choice, you know, I had to kill some of my babies for that. And it was hard, you know?
Yeah. Well, kudos, man. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Well, great. It's been really fun. I don't know if anyone else has more questions.
I think I have time. I think I have
I'm sure
an appetite for one more question.
Yeah, I'm sure Mary is exhausted now after an hour and almost 2 hours.
I do love to hear myself talk, but I'm bored with me now. So.
Well, no, it's been wonderful. The stories are great, and you've been so generous with your time. But anyone else, or maybe we could go out with another song from Bill if he's willing.
Go, let's see what we got here.
Sauceboss.com for the hot sauce and the literary ramifications.
And the forthcoming CD.
And the CDs and the LPs.
And you should check out my memoir. It's a cookbook, songbook, and a memoir, all kind of wrapped around each other.
It's a page turner.
Huh?
It's a page turner.
Yeah. Let me do this. This is hopefully I can remember the words of this. This was the riff that I had in my head when Mary called me one night and said, "Hey, I need some more music." And I said, "I got a great song. It's called Smile in the Basket." And all I had was this little thing right here. It goes like this. You can smile from the basket on your way out the door. Coming or going, it don't matter anymore. Any kind of occasion, any kind of ball. That's what a smile in a basket's for. A smile in a basket, it's not a pretty song. You never take too long. It don't cost a dime, free of charge, that's what it's for. Take a smile from the basket on your way out the door.
All right.
Beautiful.
Sort of.